Hello and welcome to a long-awaited solo episode on the Unspun Yarn. My name is Nessie. I'm your host, and welcome to my mind palace. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces, some new faces in the audience tonight. I'd like to welcome Lady Starfall. Thank you very much for coming by. Appreciate that. We also have some familiar faces. We've got Danny McKay. We've got, of course, my brothers Stephen and John from Here Be Dragons and John Webster Film. Familiar faces. Amy Blackfire. Rookie mistake. Aaron M. And Kate, Micah, Emma. It's an international coalition. We're here. Thanks, guys. So, a little nervous. This is the first solo, so bear with me. So I decided to start my Arthurian journey at one of my favorite, or what I find tales that's very interesting, to say the least. And that's the story of the questing beast. And anyone who knows me knows my Twitter handle is One Questing Beast. So here's kind of the origin story behind my Twitter handle. I'll start with the premise of the Arthurian tale. It starts with Arthur having this really odd, strange, horrible dream. And he finds out afterwards that he's just found out that he has unknowingly slept with his sister and gotten her with child. So this is very, very early in in the Arthurian tales. Arthur had just gotten his kingship, and we see here the seeds of his destruction have already been planted. No pun intended on, planted. Um, and while he's at this castle of, King Pellinore, King Pellinore starts to tell him about his family's monster, to use a phrase, or their obligation. They are tasked until their quest is completed to hunt down and capture the questing beast. And the questing beast is a product of someone in King Pellinore's past trying to commit incest. And it is the daughter of a former king, has lustful thoughts about her brother. And when he is rebuffed, and when she is rebuffed from, by him, she, yeah, we're going to get there. This is a little patriarchal, to say the least. So bear with me. She makes a deal with the devil, who gets her with child, and she accuses her brother of rape. So dad, stuck between two children, and his honor is going to be destroyed either way, has his son torn apart by by hounds, his hunting hounds. And of course, as he lays dying there, he levels the curse on his father's house. So we have kind of shades of some earlier Greek tragedies here. The one that immediately comes to mind is, of course, the tale of Oedipus and the city of Thebes, which we talked briefly about in an earlier episode on the Sphinx. So we have these themes of sovereignty and incest and terrible lies, maligned women, sinful or lustful women, and it's what brings down the kingdom. So this is a tale that's just a microcosm for the overall Arthurian legendarium. So it's like a tale within a tale, and Arthur is in a way, this tale is supposed to warn him about the future of his kingdom if he doesn't, unless there's anything he can do about it, which his he's fighting against this terrible doom the entire time. So, the questing beast itself is a composite creature, and it's made of 4 different beasts from the bestiary of heraldry. And the 4 beasts are the leopard, which represents adultery, the snake, which represents original sin, the lion, which is a Christ-like figure, and the hart, which is in ancient British society, is symbolic of the sovereignty of the kingdom. So you have all of these creatures composited into one, and the quest is to achieve it, attain it, and overcome the smirch of the past to restore your honor. So the background there for this is, of course, we talked about original sin, adultery. Now, Arthur, as most people are aware of, was the son of King Uther and Igraine. Now, Uther had this lustful desire for Igraine, but she was already married. So Arthur was kind of conceived in lust and trickery, and just he was conceived in what would be considered at the time a sin. And he was, instead of being proclaimed as the king's heir, he was sent away and hidden to hide not only Igraine's shame, but to maintain Uther's honor. So the seeds of Uther's destruction are planted in Arthur's birth. Now, Arthur, of course, he's raised unknowing. He has no idea who he is, who his family is. He's sent out and fostered with another family. After he hooks up with Merlin again and pulls the sword from the stone and gains the kingship of the Britons, this is where the story of the questing beast takes place. He had called all of his lords to court, and he was smitten with the wife of one of his noblemen, and he decided, well, he would take some of his kingly liberties with her, and it turned out that it was his half-sister, Morgause. So the seeds of his destruction were planted early. So this is touching on those biblical themes of the sins of the father being vested on the son unto the 3rd generation. When the stories of Arthur were finally written down in, what we would call modern form, because up until this time, the stories were told by troubadours and by people just using oral tradition to pass on these tales to their children. They would tell them the stories of Arthur. They would be sung in taverns, common places, where people would gather for festivals, and that's how the stories were maintained. But they weren't finally written down until much later. When the stories were finally written down, we're talking about a time in England or in medieval history that is what's called the early medieval period, which is the flowering of everything that we know or believe or consider about, knights and chivalry and courtly love, and all of the rise of the high medieval society and feudalism. So what they're kind of doing is looking back at a time in their past, or the foggy mists of time, of a time that was similar when their country was facing similar succession crisis, and they pictured it as like this idealistic time to talk about the past, but also use that as a model for, say, what we would call like spinning spin doctors, um, spinning a positive light on some of the things that they were doing. This was the time of King Louis of France, or the Sun King, and Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was, no, not the Sun King, sorry, that was wrong king, but King Louis of France and Eleanor of Aquitaine were married, and marriages were mostly political at this time, having nothing to do with emotions or feelings or whatever. This was just a political union. And they decided, or the king decided, that he would have their marriage annulled. So Eleanor, who was a very powerful woman in her own right, being the Duchess of Aquitaine, which is a very large duchy in France, she then hooks up with Henry Plantagenet of the line from William the Conqueror. At this time, the French and English nobility own castles and hold titles and are fighting over control of this between what will become Great Britain or England, Normandy, and France. So in this setting, you have this powerful woman who sets up her own little public relations factory, if you would, to promote the claims of her soon-to-be husband, Henry Plantagenet, as they're fighting back and forth to decide on the claim of the British throne. It had the succession crisis had come about because the former king died, and the succession hadn't been formalized. His daughter was Matilda, and I think it was his nephew, they both had competing claims, so the whole country was plunged into war for about an entire generation. And Henry was from the line of Matilda, so he's trying to assert his claim. Now, also at this time, there's another daughter who's called Marie of France, who was Eleanor's daughter by the King of France. And she sets up her own little court and starts, she commissions the first of these works of Arthur to be written down and preserved by, I'm going to butcher this, Chrétien de Troyes. So the policy was that they were trying to promote was that Henry had the better claim. And some of the things that they would use for it would be to have the troubadours go out and sing all of these songs, that it's not unusual for kings to have claims on both sides of the water, which was a theme that was common in a lot of the Arthurian tales. So the another one of the tales of involving the questing beast was from Tristan and Isolde, and that was common in that particular tale for the kings in England, or who have owned land in England, and also to have claims in Brittany and France. So a lot of the tales that were being told then is to tie these two political entities together to promote Henry's claim. Now, the questing beast itself, the King Pellinore was never able to complete his quest. He chased the beast his entire life, and he just gave up. And it wasn't until one of the characters in the Tristan and Isolde tale, which was oh crap. I'm so sorry. I had that written down and it's gone. Anyway, one of the admirers of Isolde, who she wasn't interested in, he was lovesick, and he ended up at King Pellinore's castle, and he decided that he would, to take his mind off of his lady love, he would fulfill this quest that King Pellinore was unable to do. And he did. He captured the questing beast. So, and that's all part of the Grail saga. And the questing beast had to be killed in the Grail saga. So it also acts as a sacrifice to achieve this holy item. So, if anybody has any questions, I'll kind of go to the chat now and see what we have. Or if anybody has any questions, you can just leave them in the chat. Okay. So one of the themes that is prevalent in a lot of the Arthurian legends is the lustful or the sinful woman. In courtly love, the woman usually in the relationship is a married woman, and she has this relationship with a younger knight that is supposed to be completely asexual. By that I mean they don't actually have physical contact in that way, but they have a very intricate and detailed and cerebral type affair with one another. The younger knight would perform acts of courage and would write poetry and do all of these romantic gestures of adoration for his object of desire. And the lady, the noblewoman's job was to remain this chaste and pure and unattainable muse, so to speak, for the adoration of the knight. And this tale runs throughout most of the tales of Arthur, because you have this Palomides is the one from Tristan and Isolde, who he idolizes Isolde, but she rebuffs him, falling instead for Tristan, who they also have this very tortured, long-term, uninitiated or whatever love affair between the two of them that is eventually they act upon it and the relationship is destroyed. What is the quest storage considered? Okay, Miss Betsy has a question. Why is the questing beast considered to be a beast? Because it was born of the unnatural union between a princess and either Satan or a demon. So it has these beast-like characteristics. And it was supposed to represent, each of the beasts was supposed to represent some type of the sin that had been committed. So, should we label Arthur the king of patriarchy? Well, these are the tales that he's been that have been told, and it's quite possible that the original tales were a little less patriarchal, or shall I say, have less of a stamp of early or middle-aged Catholicism stamped on it, because you have to remember at this particular time the Pope Gregory had recently introduced his lovely treatise on conflating all of the Marys other than the Mother of God into all the random Marys got lumped into Mary Magdalene including Mary Magdalene herself. And they were labeled as the fallen woman that put oil on the Christ's feet and washed his feet with her hair in this act of penitence. So it was during this time that these tales were written down. So you can see the mark of women as sinful and lustful, and should be, they're the weaker sex and have, less morals. So you're either a Madonna or, in this case, the Magdalene. And honestly, the Magdalene was, it's probably the better of the two picks. The real Magdalene will probably, maybe I should do a stream on her one day. But as a way of showing women in this light, and just another factor in not allowing women to have power or authority in the Catholic Church. So it's rather interesting that, a woman of immense political power herself is the person who underwrites these stories to be written. So, well, I think I'll just take a few minutes to do a little mid-roll here. This is going to be a shorter stream tonight. I have to actually go to bed not too late because I have to get up at 4:30 in the morning. So we'll probably go for maybe another 30 minutes or so. But this is the time where I'd like to say thank you everyone for coming, and make sure that you like, subscribe, maybe leave a comment. But some interaction, that would be great. Even if you don't like it, tell me what you don't like about it. That's fine. I'll try to improve. So I appreciate each and every one of you being here. And it's really great to have my friends here, almost, to hold my hand. I like to put myself out there like this. So, well, we could talk about where some of the ideas for the nightly class came from. And what I found is that the roots of what we would now call the nightly class had its basis in a later Roman class of citizens who were called the equus. And much as it sounds like, it comes from a class of people who rode or were able to ride horses, which means they could provide their own horse and would serve Rome in either the military class by joining the legions, or they could actually engage in commerce or banking. So it's kind of like allowing the lower class to rise into an upper rank where they could gain money, influence, power. But the class itself, the title of equus, was not inheritable. So it also had to do with, you had to continue to earn your place, like your father would perform great services or what have you to the state, and he was allowed these certain privileges that normal citizens didn't have, and that even upper class citizens weren't able to do, because the senators themselves, the senator class, which was above the equus class, wasn't allowed to engage in commerce or financing, because it was kind of crass, and it was just considered it was common. So too common for them. And they didn't want the senators to have like undue influence by this, having money or investments or ties or whatever in any particular system. So this class was initiated. And a lot of these same class of of Roman citizens would end up in Great Britain, because during this time, Great Britain was one of the last outposts of the British, the Roman Empire. And one of the things about Great Britain and the Romans, that any governor or magistrate or uh, general or what have you that was given authority to control Great Britain also was given a huge, huge army to because it took quite a few legions to keep Britain pacified. So because you had to man the Hadrian's Wall, and that's a quite a feat there. So that's quite a few legions. So anyone who had the strength to hold Britain also fell into, or was tempted to do, what they called the British mistake, which was they had enough power to hold the country, but should a power vacuum occur in Rome, which frequently did at the emperor, we the emperor is assassinated, poisoned, overthrown. There's unrest. He's unpopular. Then the person in control of Great Britain had enough power and authority and troops to try to invade Rome and take over as emperor. And this happened at least twice. And the last time was obviously the last time, because I believe it was Maximus took all of his legions. I think there were 4 legions to invade Rome, and they didn't come back. So you have like a few garrison outposts left with the auxiliaries that the legions left behind. Now, these were trained. These were trained soldiers. They were more than likely local citizens or sons of local citizens who were quite possibly of the Equus class, because they would have to supply their own horses and gear as part of an obligation. So these were mostly Romanized Britons, shall we say. And so you have a somewhat elite group of militarized, military trained elites who are trained in cavalry. So that's kind of gives us the rise to what became the knights in medieval literature. Because of course these knights, once these equus, once the legions left, were kind of like de facto militia people for local warlords, or they would go back to the person who supplied or sponsored them, or gathered them as a tithe to Rome, and kind of be like a standing army or retainers or what have you. So when they could no longer take service with the legion, they took service with local chieftains or what have you. So there. Thanks, Rome. So it was always considered like this class that owed its allegiance to a sponsor, because they were, it was fairly expensive to be a knight. You had to provide your own equipment. You had to provide your own weapons. You had to provide your own feed and take care of your own horse. And if you could take service with a lord, some of that duty and burden could be taken off of you in exchange for, of course, for your loyalty, mead and meat at his table. If you would provide, service to this petty chieftain or this warlord or this king of whatever county. So, fun little factoid. So, as this was the basis of, I guess, feudalism. than patriarchy. So, all right. Thanks, room. Yeah. I'm just going to click up and see if there's anything in the chat. Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%, Stephen. We should cover that one day on your channel. So, well, I think that's going to be about all I had to say about this. Thank you all for coming in and joining me tonight. I know it's a little late. Normally I stream a little earlier in the day, but it is what it is these days. So I'd like to thank everybody that came. Yeah, please post any questions. Thanks. When did full plate armor come in? That's a very specific question. That would be more of a late, later Middle Ages invention. Middle to late. Now they would use armor that had like scales and leather and some plate. Full plate was very, very expensive, very expensive. And that would be generally only the higher nobility would be able to afford such luxuries. The common knight would use lesser pieces, partial pieces, a helmet, some protection on his arms, maybe his legs, but mostly like scale and leather and things like that. So yeah, 14th century sounds, yeah. Thank you, Stephen, for being very specific. The 14th century, that's like middle to middle high, Middle Ages, the middle of the middle clump. Okay. They bumped up the price of being a knight. That's funny. Okay. Any other questions before I go? What is this? What was this? Sure, John, you're welcome to come on at any time. I had just yeah, the middle clump of the Middle Ages. This is the first time that I've done a solo stream. I usually have a guest or two with me to help carry the conversation, which is great because I love the let me take this off. I love the ebb and the flow of the conversation and how it sparks other conversations and other great thoughts and other great ideas. But this is something that I needed to do for myself. So I appreciate you guys coming up and coming by and listening to me solo it for the first time. And thank you so much for the interest you've shown. I've saw so many new faces here, and that's just amazing to me. If you like the channel, this is just a small sample of what I usually do, because normally my streams will go about 2 hours long with a panel of guests. But if you like this type of topic, or if you have any ideas of mythology or legendarium that you'd like to discuss, you can, I would happily enjoy having a comment, or you can send me a message on Twitter. I'm very open to suggestions about content. I like to talk about so many different things. It's from China to monkeys to South American legends to, what's on TV. So anyway, that being said, hit a like, maybe hit a subscribe, and I will see you guys next time around. Thanks and good night.